Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announces more financial aid for Ukraine as the war-torn country battles to keep its independence from Russia. Even though many COVID-19 mandates have been lifted in Alberta, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is still suing Alberta Health Services. We will explain why. And Canada has its first Indigenous-led Crime Stoppers program. We will explain what that means for the Blood Tribe community.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Polish President Andrzej Duda says so far Canada is the only country to contact his government to offer help managing a refugee crisis before Russia invaded Ukraine last month. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will help ensure that Russian President Vladimir Putin faces justice for war crimes committed during the invasion of Ukraine. Trudeau also announced more humanitarian aid to help Ukrainian refugees.
But we're also going to be providing immediate assistance where it's needed most, with $50 million from our $100 million in humanitarian aid previously announced, which has been already allocated to experienced partners with the capacity to help displaced populations, including organizations like the World Food Programme, and Save the Children, and others. And of course, Canada is going to be welcoming Ukrainians to our country, so we've actually provided an additional funding of $117 million to support special immigration measures, including accelerating the treatment of files so that we can get Ukrainians fleeing for their lives to Canada sooner and help ease the burden of Poland and neighboring countries that are doing so much in this conflict right now.
Prime Minister Trudeau also says Canada will match donations made to the Canadian Red Cross for crisis relief in Ukraine up to $30 million. That's triple the initial amount. 2 weeks into the war in Ukraine, reports say Russia has achieved less and struggled more than anticipated. As Russian forces continue to press onto the capital, the residents of Kyiv called on the reservist units of the Territorial Defense Forces to train and stand ready to fight.
Every parent must be defend the children, but we are now together because it's our choice, it's our way. It's not possible to have another way because it's our motherland. We must be defend our motherland first of all. My son have 3 daughters, must have the future. The European future, because it's for me, for example, I live in the Soviet Union more than half of my life, and I very well know what is the Soviet Union.
Around 700 Ukrainians fleeing the Russian-captured town of Orzel and part of Irpin were able to escape the war through a humanitarian corridor late on Wednesday.
Ми 14 днів просиділи в підвалі. Що страшно. У нас з підвала 3 чоловік вбили русські. Прямо з автомата розстріляли. Кинули 200 ташумової гранати, там, де люди сиділи, більше 20 чоловік. Перші, хто вискочив, їх убили, розстріляли. Де вона родилася?
The Pentagon rejected Poland's surprise announcement that it would give the United States its former Soviet MiG-29 fighter jets for use by Ukraine. That showed a rare display of disharmony by NATO allies seeking to aid Ukraine, while at the same time avoiding getting into a wider war with Russia.
Of course, originally, as announced yesterday by the Polish government, was that they would provide their Soviet-era MiG-29 jets to the U.S. in Germany and leave it up to the U.S. to figure out how to get them to Ukraine. And the Pentagon said today they were not even told that the Polish government was going to announce this. So they were caught by surprise, and that's not normally the way they try to do business. You know, the Ukrainian Air Force is maybe not the first choice for the type of Ukrainian defenses are going to be used in the coming days. They are being used, they are flying, and they're flying with some effect, but the Pentagon's point is that there are other aspects of the Ukrainian military that are being put to greater effect, in greater use, have been and will continue to be. And those are the sorts of things that the Biden administration wants to focus on in terms of providing them with assistance.
It turns out a number of Canadians and Americans are headed to Ukrainian embassies in various cities across North America and signing up to join the fight in Ukraine. A general in the Ukrainian army explains what he's seen so far.
They have feeling that this war is unfair, unprovoked. They clearly understand, they see pictures of killing children, and they understand that there is no explanation of what Russia is doing in Ukraine. This country was created based on certain values. So we are sharing these values as well, and that motivates Americans to go and assist Ukraine. If this person fits requirement, and person goes to Ukraine and then signs a contract with armed forces of Ukraine. So there is not mercenaries who are coming to earn money, not at all. This is people of goodwill who are coming to assist Ukraine to fight for freedom.
The ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine caused a lot of Jewish people to flee their homes in Ukraine and make their way to Israel. The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem says they welcomed 200 refugees from the war-torn country.
Hello, friends. I'm at the Ben Gurion Airport. We're soon to welcome 200 new immigrants arriving, plus another 100 that arrived just earlier this afternoon. Preparations are going on around me for the flight to land very shortly. After a harrowing week and a difficult week of tragedy, long waits in lines, uncertainty, separation of families, at last they're able to come to Israel. This is something previous generations did not have the privilege of doing, and we're so excited to be a part of it. Come with me and let's go welcome them.
But I'm thankful that I'm here and safe and my family with me, and thank you Israel for this.
The outpouring of help and support, and I want to send from here in Israel blessings. God bless all of you, all of our friends who are really rising to the occasion to help us in this dark hour, but what will end up being, when we look back, also a moment that we shine bright thanks to your help and support.
Friends, we're wrapping up. They've arrived and they're headed to hostels and hotels. We're ready to head out. We wish them well. We hope that they will establish themselves well in this land, and that many, many more will come here to safety. There are many, many more who need that sanctuary in these days, and we look forward to welcoming them here. Thank you for your help along the way.
A Lethbridge Ukrainian woman who has family connections in Ukraine says she fears she may never hear from her loved ones again as the war continues in her homeland. As Angela Stewart explains, the woman's brother is working directly with those who've been affected by the missile attacks and bombings.
I'm very worried about
The thought of never being able to see her family members again has Irina Piravirzivia up all night knowing they're in the midst of a war between Russia and Ukraine. Irina says she especially fears for her little brother as he's living in Kharkiv, one of the hardest hit cities.
very dangerous situation because it's city very close in Russian road. I think just 40 kilometers.
As for Irina's parents, they are safe but still in danger.
My parents live in small city, but near nuclear power station. The station was attacked. I'm very happy they're alive. I realize they can die every minute.
When the war broke out on February 24th, Irina says her brother up and moved his life to a hospital where he works as a doctor taking care of victims hit by the attacks.
Every day, around 10 people, civil people, it's not soldiers, it's civil people, come to hospital with very big injury from shot, gun, from explosive weapons.
Even being overseas and away from the destruction, she says she doesn't feel lucky.
I'm not lucky because I'm very worried. I'm scared about all my relatives.
Irina continues to do the best she can each day, but is very terrified for her family.
Try to believe it will be a miracle and he will be alive, and my parents, of course. But now I understand I'm not sure.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Now on Saturday, another Support Ukraine rally will be taking place in our city on the steps of City Hall, and it goes from 11 till 1 p.m. The anonymous crime tip line Crime Stoppers has now made its way to the Blood Tribe. Crime Stoppers is a nonprofit agency that allows you to provide confidential tips on crime. If a tip leads to an arrest, you can be eligible for a cash reward. The Blood Tribe Crime Stoppers is the first Indigenous-led initiative in Canada. The chief of the Blood Tribe Police Force, Bryce Ironshirt, says using Crime Stoppers will be beneficial in battling the opioid crisis facing the reserve.
As it stands right now, we're very limited in resources, and utilizing this program is going to be a great benefit as our ways of gathering intelligence has basically shot forward now. So we're anticipating a huge help in providing our combating the opioid crisis.
The reason why it's so important is because we want to show other Indigenous communities that thinking outside the box and just going for an idea or concept that you have is possible. Not only that, we can work together to keep our communities safe. So I think right now with the rising crimes in our Indigenous communities, we need to think about something else, but also protecting our people at the same time.
You can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 if you have a tip related to a crime, and a trained professional will be able to walk you through the process. Chances are you've known someone who has been impacted by cancer. Members of the Taber Fire Department gathered in solidarity of a fellow firefighter who was recently diagnosed with the disease. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, the group shaved their heads in support of their friend and co-worker.
After I got done crying, I was just totally shocked and overwhelmed by the support.
Rose Rowe was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a type of blood cancer. There's currently no cure, but treatments can slow the spread of the disease. After being diagnosed with cancer, her colleagues and friends from the Town of Taber Fire Department decided to show support for her by shaving their heads.
It has given me so much strength. I still had my hair then and I was feeling really guilty, but now I've lost it. But yeah, I haven't cried when I lost it, and I just think of all these firefighters and especially the girls, you know, not to take away from the guys, but yeah, it's just given me so much strength, and the support is just phenomenal.
Rowe began her chemotherapy a few weeks ago at the Tom Baker Cancer Centre in Calgary.
And they harvested my own stem cells. And I'm admitted to the hospital in Calgary, March 22nd, and I'll be there for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I go through more chemo, and they actually give me my own stem cells back. So, and then after that, if everything goes well, then it's just, you know, a slow recovery, and then hopefully I'm good.
Steve Swarbrick, the assistant fire chief for the Taber Fire Department, has been with the force for 23 years, and he has known Roll even before she became a firefighter.
She's a pretty quiet lady and not one to ask for help, but it was a chance that we had to do it, and worked out really well.
Britt Adkin has been working as a firefighter for the Taber Fire Department for almost 4 years now. Adkin says it was an instant friendship as her and Roll quickly connected and became friends.
She's often the one in the background helping out where nobody can see, and I really appreciated that about her. I appreciate her genuineness in everything that she does. We just really love her.
Roll says her firefighter family has treated her like one of their own, and she's thankful for the support they've been giving her during this difficult time. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Even though the government of Alberta announced that it is lifting the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for healthcare workers effective March 10th, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is still moving ahead with a court case. The group will continue in its court action against AHS for violating the charter rights of 4 family physicians. Eva Chipyuk is a lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, and she joins us now from Edmonton. Eva, is this more about delivering a powerful message to Alberta Health Services?
There's a lot of issues and legal questions that haven't had an opportunity to be answered, particularly the constitutionality of this mandate. I've said this many times before, is that law is slow. Unfortunately, lots has moved in this COVID time very fast. Lots of laws have been enacted by the government. Things have been moving very fast, and it's going to take a little bit of time for the courts to catch up. And we really need answers to a lot of the questions that we've posed in the lawsuit. People legitimately lost jobs. People were sitting at home, not working, and these are doctors that are here for us. So there's a lot of issues we want to discuss, as well natural immunity in this case, particularly with doctors that made their own medical decision about not taking a form of medicine, this needs to go to court. We need to have answers.
Now, you say that some doctors felt they were subjected to discrimination and coercion, which then created a hostile work environment?
Heartbreaking, really heartbreaking stories. Their supervisors were taking these actions. You know, the work environment just was unpleasant, shaming, people losing their positions. And it was a constant story I heard. And, you know, we're representing 4 people here, 4 doctors, but this affected a lot more than these 4 doctors. And again, that's another reason we need answers.
Eva, thank you so much for your time today. That was Eva Chipiuk, staff lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Edmonton. As of February 25th of this year, the Public Health Agency of Canada says there have been just over 40,000 adverse events following people who received the COVID-19 immunization. The agency says out of 80.8 million doses administered, that's a rate of around 0.05%. Most of the adverse effects were said to be non-serious. Now, some of these side effects, however, did include an inflammation of the heart muscle and lining around the heart, along with blood clots. Most of the myocarditis and pericarditis occurred in young adult males under the age of 24 after receiving a second dose. Meanwhile, a 1-year-old 38-page document released by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is showing up on social media, shows hundreds of reported adverse events related to the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. Health experts warn, however, that a lot of real world has been collected since then. The province of Alberta announced today that it is increasing funding to emergency medical services to the tune of $64 million. Officials say the increase will help EMS respond to high-demand areas. $28 million will go towards more ground ambulances and crews, in addition to help support helicopter air ambulance services. $22 million will increase capacity and support integrated operation centers, and another $14 million will help to address crew fatigue. Premier Jason Kenney, in a statement, says the province is investing a record level in health care in Budget 2022 to have a strong and resilient health system. Some municipal leaders say Albertans should be able to cast ballots in a referendum on whether to replace the RCMP with a provincial police force. Members of Alberta municipalities also voted 144-34 to reject the proposed models the UCP is considering for a provincial police force. President Kathy Huron says municipal leaders are not able to get questions answered, and there's been little engagement with the province. Independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes thinks replacing the RCMP with a provincial police force is a pretty good idea. Barnes says a provincial police force would give Albertans more autonomy when it comes to policing, similar to what Ontario and Quebec currently have.
Too often, rural crime is reaching extremes in Alberta. Albertans aren't feeling safe. Albertans aren't being protected. First of all, this would allow Albertans to have more control over the quality of their policing and directing it.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes coming up in the second half of our program. Val Olson is a former Alberta radio personality and runs the social media account Home Media Mom. Val, like many other Conservative Albertans, is concerned with the leadership of Premier Jason Kenney and the United Conservative Party of Alberta. Val says the pandemic has not been handled very well in our province, and Premier Jason Kenney needs to step down. She says, but first, Kenney needs to apologize.
There are no families across Alberta that haven't been impacted negatively by some of his mandates and policies. And we've talked an awful lot about his freedom-sucking initiatives, but what can he do now? I think he has to step down gracefully. That's what he needs to do. He needs to start with 2 words. I'm sorry.
Make sure you watch the full interview with Home Media Mom Val Olson and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Well, it appears as though Alberta is not the only province seeing a doctor shortage. Data from the Saskatchewan Ministry of Health says that province is facing a steady decline of physicians. Recent stats show the province's pool of doctors has decreased by nearly 3% since 2018 and 2019. There are currently 1,806 doctors in Saskatchewan. The loss is even higher among family doctors, which has seen an 8% decrease since 2018 and 2019. Ontario Education Minister Stephen Lecce is defending the plan to end mask rules in schools after March break. Educators have expressed concerns about the move taking effect on March 21st, saying many families could be traveling over the March break, leading to an increased risk of spreading COVID-19. Lachey points to ventilation improvements in schools and says Ontario is following the recommendations of its chief medical health officer.
73,000 HEPA units have already been in place in every classroom and learning space where there is not a mechanical ventilation system. We improved every mechanical ventilation system, and now, in addition, we just announced 49,000 additional HEPA units which are being sent to classrooms as we speak in the month of March, early April, as well as 9,000 that will go to childcare spaces. So we believe all of this is designed to reduce risk as measures lift over time with the full support of the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest has jumped into the race to become the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. The 63-year-old Charest says he believes in fiscal conservatism. He says he's no liberal and no hyphenated conservative. He told reporters that he's been preparing for this his entire life to become the leader of the federal Conservatives and then Prime Minister of Canada. Charest says he will deliver a majority government with representation in every part of the country. He also says he wants to put Alberta back at the table. The CPC will choose their new leader on September the 10th. Well, it was good to feel some warmer temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta today, and not a bad weekend is shaping up either. Full weather details are coming up. It was kind of a mixed bag today. Sunshine mixed with clouds and light flurries in some areas of southwestern Alberta. Tonight, more flurries developing with a low near -12. Friday, just a few clouds developing with a high near 6. Saturday, lots of sunshine with a high of 10 degrees. Partly cloudy on Sunday with the mercury dropping slightly with a high near 7. Monday, warming up to 12 degrees. Tuesday, expect a cloudy day with a high near 16. Wednesday, mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 11. Now, the average high for this time of year is 5 degrees with an average low of -8. The record high for this day was 17 degrees set back in 1981, and the record low was a very chilly -36 from 1951. The sun rose at 6:56 and set at 6:27. Looking at the national forecast for Friday now, there's a good chance of rain developing and a high of 7 degrees in Victoria. Rain mixed with snow in Vancouver and a high of 6. A 30% chance of flurries and a high of +1 for Edmonton. Sun mixed with cloud and 5 degrees for Calgary on Friday. A sunny but cold -17 is expected in Regina. Just a few clouds and -15 degrees for Saskatoon. -15 as well for Winnipeg on Friday. In the central part of the country, expect light flurries and around +1 in Toronto, overcast and -1 for Ottawa, a slight chance of flurries and +1 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly cloudy and 7 degrees in Fredericton, sunshine and 6 degrees for Halifax, cloudy and 3 for Charlottetown, and in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect sun mixed with cloud and a high near 4 degrees on Friday. Gas prices continue to increase despite the first significant drop in crude prices since the war in Ukraine began. Gas price tracking website GasBuddy.com says the national average price climbed to $1.86.6 per litre. Here in Lethbridge, we're hovering around the $1.78 per litre mark. That's up 20.6 cents from last week's average. Industry experts say prices at the pumps will lag behind oil prices for a few more days. Stations have not fully passed the rise on, so an 11% drop in the benchmark price for crude yesterday does not mean lower prices at the pumps today. Canada's McCain Foods announced that it has stopped construction and is ending a project to build a production facility in Russia. It is also suspending shipments to Russia because of the country's invasion of Ukraine. The French fry maker's decision comes as countries and major global firms stop work in Russia or with Russian companies because of the invasion and economic sanctions. Empire Company says it's focused on its supplier relationships to ensure competitive pricing as inflation continues to push up the cost of goods. The grocer says it is also using different sourcing options as it experiences supply chain issues mostly related to labor shortages caused by COVID-19. The parent company of Sobeys, Safeway, and Freshco made the comments as it reported third quarter earnings were up 15% to $203.4 million. It says sales were up 5% from a year earlier to $7.38 billion, helped by the purchase of Longos and higher fuel sales. Canadian Tire's announced a $3.4 billion investment plan to help improve customer experiences online and in stores while growing its loyalty program. It says the plan will also strengthen its supply chain fulfillment infrastructure and automation and modernize its information technology infrastructure. The retailer says the investment is aimed at boosting sales and driving long-term growth. Company officials say it will improve customer experiences, create jobs, and help drive local economies. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 88 points to 21,581. The Dow was down 112 points to 33,174. The S&P 500 was down 18 points to 4,259. The Nasdaq was down 125 points to 13,130. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 268 to 106.02 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 11 cents to $4.63 U.S. Gold was down 8 cents to $1,996.90 U.S. an ounce. Silver was up a cent to $25.92 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.60 per bushel. Barley's at $9.88. Canola is at $25.70. Corn is at $12.19 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.68 to $135.90. Feeder cattle were down $2.40 to $151.65. Lean hogs were down $1.05 to $110. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.30 U.S.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will help ensure that Russian President Vladimir Putin faces justice for war crimes committed during the invasion of Ukraine. Ottawa's committing more money to address the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine as well. Trudeau says our government will match donations to the Canadian Red Cross up to $30 million. Polish President Andrzej Duda says at least 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine are now in Poland seeking help. Val Olson, who goes by Home Media Mom, is a concerned Albertan who feels that Premier Jason Kenney owes Albertans an apology. She will explain why in just a moment. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Helen Schuler Nature Center is providing an introductory workshop to fly fishing on Saturday, March 26th from 12:30 to 4 p.m. Learn about Alberta's native fish species, get tips and tricks for choosing equipment, try your hand at tying flies, and practice casting techniques. The workshop is $25 per person and is open to those 16 years and older. To register, call the Nature Center at 403-320-3064. The 11th annual Coaldale Family Fun Run is going virtual and in person. Run or walk, this race is a great motivator to get out and get active. The virtual race begins April 2nd and the in-person event takes place Saturday, April 9th, beginning at 10 a.m. at Coaldale Christian School. $2 from every entry will go to support Rehoboth, a Christian ministry which serves people with disabilities. To register and for more information, visit racepro.ca/Coaldale. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Well, Albertans have seen a lot of shuffling within the provincial government as of late. The UCP has been assigning ministerial positions. Others are looking to gain positions within the party, and there's a leadership vote in Red Deer in just a few weeks, meaning Jason Kenney is advocating to party members for a new mandate as leader. But is Jason Kenney popular enough to retain his position as leader of the UCP? Right now, Alberta politics is far more than Jason Kenney and the UCP. Joining me to discuss is former Medicine Hat radio personality Val Olson. Val, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate having you on.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jeanette.
Of course. So, Val, Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge over the weekend selling party memberships and asking members for another shot at the leadership of his party. So he seems very unpopular both in and out of the party. What do you think he has to do to retain his seat and win the next provincial election?
The question is he willing to do it? I think because he would have had a real eye-opener in Lethbridge. I did hear that neighborhoods he was visiting, he did not have a positive response. And rightfully so. He really has pulled the bully card, in the neighborhood that it's affected all of us. There are no families across Alberta that haven't been impacted negatively by some of his mandates and policies. And we've talked an awful lot about his freedom-sucking initiatives. But what can he do now? I think he has to step down gracefully. That's what he needs to do. He needs to start with 2 words. I'm sorry. And I don't believe that's going to happen. I'd love to be proved wrong on that, but he doesn't seem to take accountability for his own actions.
Wow. Now, Rachel Notley, of course, has been leading in a recent poll from a Canadian broadcaster at the end of January with 42% support, while Jason Kenney had only 31% support. So where have the other third of the voters given their support?
Well, the problem with polls is unless we see the data ourselves, meaning unless we're in the neighborhood in Lethbridge and we can visually see with our own eyes, this guy is not liked and he is not popular, we have to be real careful about polls, because the most accurate thing we can do is go out and hit the doors ourselves. That would be one way to actually get a realistic polling of what's happening in our own neighborhood. Talk to 10 people, and out of 10 people, 9 will tell you, I don't want Jason Kenney as my master and ruler any longer.
Yeah, interesting, of course. Now, going back to this poll, of course, does this mean that almost 60% of Alberta voters don't support Rachel Notley and the NDP? Is there a possibility of vote splitting, or do Albertans have to get involved in the UCP and make it what they want?
Absolutely. The process is so important. We cannot just cast a ballot nonchalantly and walk away. Being a voter is a full-time job, and we really have to micromanage our vote. Accountability is so important. So it really starts with us taking initiative, getting on the boards, going through the process, and getting in the faces of these politicians. That is how you're going to see things change.
Okay, so we always hear about vote splitting and starting new parties, but is this just that the people don't want to do the actual work and salvage what they have in the UCP? What's your thought?
Well, Jeanette, we often hear, don't vote this way because you're going to cause vote split. Can you imagine carrying that weight on your back as the official vote splitter in your community? Isn't it an effective psychological weapon to use it like that, to go around telling people, you better vote this way because vote split, you don't want to be that person? And people just get shy and scared and say, oh, okay, well, tell me how to vote. And that's the problem with that tell me how to vote. We've got to lose that kind of talk. We got to lose that kind of thinking. And it's all about self-accountability, and do the hard work, do the investigative research on who you're electing. I could use Jason Kenney as an example, as a politician who went to the elderly ladies and he told them, I'm all for saving babies' lives and, donate to my cause. I'm the champion of life, of freedom-loving initiatives. And he really isn't. Look at what he hasn't done for, our largest and most important future Canadians. He's done nothing to protect their lives, but yet he has collected donations in the past saying that he was the real spokesperson and go-to guy for saving babies' lives. So it's as simple as that. If we follow what comes out of their mouths and hold them to account and stop funding their initiatives that are anti-freedom, anti-family, that's when you're going to start seeing politicians like Jason Kenney sit up a little straighter and start listening to his largest vote block. And I'm just a reflection of our largest vote block, being families in Alberta.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Val, you and I have discussed before about how politics begins at the dinner table. So a lot of people have just talked about politics, but I think with the freedom rallies we've seen across Canada, wouldn't you agree that the tide is turning and people are doing more than just talking now? So many more people are becoming involved.
You nailed it, 100%. In fact, I was watching coverage from Ottawa in particular, where there was an elderly gentleman who was sitting in his semi and he held out a Ziploc bag of money. And he made sure to say, this money came from a homeschooling family that had trekked across Ontario, who had sold eggs and came up with ways to raise money and wanted to do something for the truckers. That little guy was under the age of 12. And it melted my heart because it has moved from the dinner table to discussions where mom and dad and children are strategizing together to come find ways to support the heroes who truly are standing up for our freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that Canada is beyond repair, or is there a chance for Canadians to fight against what we're seeing in Ottawa?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I think we could start with our most important rights. I'm going to touch on freedom of speech because that impacts our religious community. There has been a real target on pastors, specifically in our Christian community. There are pastors that have been jailed, and it's been just gut-wrenching watching their little children cry as dad is being hauled away to go to jail. Now, Canada is worth saving. These pastors are preaching the truth. They're spreading the good news message. And as of this hour, I'm thinking, at the Calgary Remand Center, one remains locked in custody, away from his family. And people are coming in droves, showing up, praying, exercising their freedom of speech. They are waving Canadian flags. So our country, 100%, is freedom-loving people that are being united with the cause of love.
Mm-hmm. We've been hearing about a movement for Alberta to join America as a state. I've been hearing about this for years, actually. Do you think that this really could be a future possibility?
I'm telling you straight up, this is not a pipe dream. Discussions are happening. Wendy Rogers, she's actually a former member of the U.S. Air Force and is an Arizona state senator. And just to quote her, she said, "Trudeau sucks so bad, we should start allowing Canadian provinces to declare independence and vote on U.S. statehood." Okay, so again, that is an Arizona state senator who has went on Twitter and she's saying that. So she's getting a lot of traction. There is a movement. It's called the Alberta Statehood Movement. Right now, as of this morning, I did do a check on membership, 9,200 members, and it just keeps growing. Now, it is a bi-national group, and it's a reunification group across North America. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can go on albertastatehoodparty.com. There are meetings, there's initiatives to get people fired up and get out there, get membership sold, and start saying why we need to do this. Now, reuniting Alberta with their social, cultural, historical roots, and best of all, economically unite Alberta with its number one trade partner being 50 American states in permanent free trade just makes sense to Albertans. So there are a lot of people pursuing this idea because there's positives every which way you look. And so, yes, it is growing. And there are a lot of, hopes and dreams that are being planted right now, specifically in Arizona. I'm just looking at some of the involvement and wow, it is impressive and it is a big deal.
Do you think that this actually has a serious chance of actually happening in the near future?
I do. I mean, to quote again, Trudeau sucks so bad. Okay, that's what a state senator, one of, is saying about our prime minister. And when you look at Jason Kenney, and he, was representing the was supposed to be representing conservatism, he's done everything opposite of conservatism. So people are starved. They are starved for freedom, and they look to the United States and they look at what the Constitution stands for, the rights that it allows people. And we do not have the rights that Americans have in Canada. Just take what's happening right now in Canada. You could take pastors being jailed. You could take the mandates that are still in place, all those kinds of things. Canada is really, set out as an eyesore on the big scale of human rights violations.
Okay, so Val, another issue facing Canadians and actually facing Americans too, it seems to be happening everywhere, the high cost of inflation. And of course, this affects our grocery bills as well. So are there practical steps Alberta families can take to help with this? I know you do tend to advocate a lot for families and for moms.
Yes, so absolutely. And healthy eating, following the Canadian Food Guide is key. And what family can actually follow the Canadian Food Guide and its recommendations for healthy food when we look at the price at the grocery store? I mean, if you just want to go take beef as an example, beef is so important to a family. It's brain food, and parents can't afford to feed their kids Alberta beef. What on earth is going on, and what can we do? So, what many families are doing in Medicine Hat specifically, I had heard of families years ago doing this, but they were starting to purchase groceries wholesale. And this is happening now, even in Edmonton. So, there are groups that are coming together, families that are forming and saying, look, here's what we've got. Let's get the best that we can. And so it's groups that are shopping that way instead of going to the grocery stores and shopping the traditional way. They're really taking their own steps and stretching their dollar the best way that they can, which is amazing. There is so much to do that is just incredible. So if you're someone that is really noticing the pinch, start looking on Facebook. Look for these local groups that are popping up.
So sort of a communal approach to grocery shopping.
Yes.
It's very interesting, very neighborly as well. Val, it does look like we are running out of time, but thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate having you on again.
Thanks so much, Jeanette.
Political representation is an important aspect of our democratic life here in Alberta. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about an independent Alberta. Albertans are apt to protect their ways of life and speak for what they want and what they think is right. Drew Barnes is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and he's no stranger to standing up for and speaking out for what he believes is right. Drew Barnes joins me now to talk about the issues facing Alberta. Drew, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Drew, there's been a lot said over the years about equalization of payments and spreading Alberta's wealth across the country. You were part of that Fair Deal panel, and one of the recommendations of the panel was to consider the creation of a provincial police force. So we've heard that this is a very expensive option, but can you maybe tell us why the provincial police force might be a good idea for the people of Alberta?
Well, great. Thank you for that. Well, first of all, more control over our policing. Too often, rural crime is reaching extremes in Alberta. Albertans aren't feeling safe. Albertans aren't being protected. First of all, this would allow Albertans to have more control over the quality of their policing and directing it. Secondly, it comes down to a large part of the leverage in the situation we're in with our Canadian partners. Not only do we send upwards of $25 billion a year to Ottawa, the relationship has been defined to me as even abusive at times. We can't get pipelines. We can't get free trade with our Canadian partner. And that brings back the quality of life and the income for Alberta families and Alberta communities. So there's some of us that believe that, yes, we want to be a strong part of Canada, but we need equity and fairness. So things like our own police force, like Ontario and Quebec both already have, would not only give us the opportunity for more say and control over our policing, but it would help Ottawa understand that Albertans want to have more control over their situation, and we want a fair deal. We want resource movement, and that would be a good first step.
Mm-hmm. So considering that idea of a provincial police force, you obviously see value there where others say it's just too expensive?
Well, I think part of the problem there is Premier Kenney, my goodness, in his third year, he has lost so much trust with Albertans and Alberta municipalities. He hasn't clearly conveyed to our municipalities how it would work and how the cost would be. As an example, I understand that right now the federal government supports Alberta to the tune of about $350 million a year for policing. But again, in some municipalities, were understaffed. And secondly, the cost of policing has just been increased substantially. I mean, God bless the individual work that individual RCMP officers do, but I understand they just all got a $20,000 retroactive raise, which of course, eventually the taxpayer will have to pay that. So with the other financial situations that Ottawa's boxed themselves into, it's only going to get less and less likely that they'll continue to support policing, through Alberta. So let's put Alberta families first in mind. Let's make our communities safer. Secondly, let's have more say over our police force and where we need them. And thirdly, let's show the rest of Canada that it's time that Alberta be treated with equality and fairness, that we get resource movement, and doing things like the police force are a step towards showing that we can be more autonomous.
So do you think that maybe the provincial government just has not done a good idea of educating these individual municipalities on the benefits of what a provincial police force might look like? I believe there's something like 80 some odd municipalities across Alberta that are banding together to present to the provincial government their reasons for why this is not a good idea. Do you think that they just haven't been sort of informed, or do you think that they're going into this well-informed and they just still are, standing firm and saying no?
Yeah, well, I also think it's partly municipalities have had a lot of pressure on them right now, our elected representatives. For many people in Alberta, this has been a tough 2 or 3 years, even longer with the change in oil pricing 5 or 6 years ago. And municipalities are hearing from their constituents that they can't raise taxes anymore. So good, caring councillors and mayors and reeves are concerned about having to pass more costs back to their ratepayers. So I think that's where it starts. But then the secondary problem is sometimes I'm hearing about how, because of staffing issues, that the RCMP can't be in enough places throughout rural Alberta, especially. So we need to have these services. So I guess that, to me, that's where it starts. We need a provincial government that shows Alberta municipalities that when it comes to issues like safety, we'll be there for them. And of course, one of the silver linings of this bump in oil prices in the last little while is the Alberta Treasury is once again, a lot of money flowing in. So there'll be some extra money for important things. I very much would like to see government smaller, but also policing is a key part of it. So that's where it starts. Caring municipal councillors and mayors are concerned about the taxation future for their constituents. And then secondly, Jason Kenney has lost the trust of so many Albertans. They're wondering, they're just wondering how this will all play out. So I think it's important to, get to the table with Ottawa, let them know that, yes, we want to be a strong part of Canada, but if not, we are prepared to be more autonomous and independent if necessary. Alberta should be the freest and most prosperous place.
Yeah, interesting. Now, Drew, can you maybe describe what this transition from RCMP to an Alberta police force would look like?
Yes. Well, Alberta used to have our own police force provincially in the 1930s, so it's not impossible. Basically, March 31st of any year, we have to give notice to the RCMP that we want out of the contract, even though I think it's 35 years left on the contract. So we can get out of it. Of course, Fort Macleod, you remember 6 or 7 years ago, they were going to set up a police training center at Fort Macleod. I mean, here we are on the basis of where we could do that again. Hey, and let's not forget that all the municipalities, the bigger ones rather, have their own police forces now anyway, except Red Deer. So Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, we have our own police forces. So the training that could be in collaboration and coordination with these municipality police forces and our provincial police force is there anyway. So I believe it's just a matter of picking the right time, giving the RCMP the proper notice, putting out to our sheriffs and the existing RCMP members now that there'll be jobs available, making sure that our training center, whether it's in Fort Macleod or somewhere else, is set up, ready to go. And I think what will result will be much safer communities for Albertans, and long term, I don't think there'll be any budget consequences.
Okay, and you bring up an interesting point about how all the larger centers already have police force. We're talking more rural areas. One of the issues we do hear from rural Albertans is the lack of law enforcement in those rural areas. So do you believe that there's an equitable solution for these crime rates? And would the Alberta Police Force be that?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. I hear that all the time about how there may be only one or two officers covering 400 miles by 400 miles. And of course, we can all only be in one place at a time. Also, I hear quite a bit that our RCMP and our municipal police forces are having a little trouble coordinating the regional policing. As an example, criminals don't just do crimes in Medicine Hat. They'll run into Cypress County or 40 Mile County and Medicine Hat. So there is some element of cross jurisdictions. I absolutely believe that a provincial police force with the quality men and women that are out there to serve in it would be better at making sure that we were all protected more so, and to make sure that these jurisdictions that cross a bit would have better collaboration. So I think in the long run, we'd all be safer. We could all. And again, let's also not underestimate the fact that the Alberta Police Chief would be closer connected to Cabinet and the Premier, and the direction and the planning that could go from there would be better for all of us as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Interesting point that you bring up there. So speaking of Jason Kenney, where do you see Alberta headed in the next 2 years with Jason Kenney and the UCP?
It's absolutely clear that the UCP cannot win with Jason Kenney as leader. The last year shows the NDP way ahead in the polls and out fundraising Jason Kenney led UCP by miles. So it's essential that Albertans do what it takes to remove Jason Kenney as the leader of the UCP party, so the UCP can try to determine if they can go forward and present a new face for Albertans. If we don't do it, we're certainly looking at the NDP and the overreach and the big government that comes with them. It's 3 years in, and Jason Kenney has so not met the expectations of Albertans. He was given a grassroots, fiscally conservative mandate. And of course, that's resulted in sentences like, I'm the one that holds the pen, or I want a new base. And, unfortunately, Jason Kenney has lost the trust and the confidence of Albertans. And unless a change is made there, we'll be looking at another NDP government and the devastation that comes with that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, with the numerous other political interests on the right side of the political spectrum in Alberta, do you think the NDP could form the next Alberta government?
Well, the polls for at least a year now are showing that they're in the majority territory, and they would, if everything is as it is today, that they would form the majority government. But let's not forget that consistently 75% of Albertans identify or vote fiscally conservative. They are looking for an option where they can place their vote with trust and confidence. And unfortunately, Jason Kenney has lost both of those two things. So whether that means a change in the leadership of the UCP, whether that means a new party on the right starting to fill that vacuum where Albertans are looking for economic freedom, individual opportunity, and fiscal conservatism. We're down now. The next election is the last Monday in May 2023, so we're about 14 months away. This spring is going to be very interesting as people start to figure out, their paths and where they want to go. And of course, that starts with the April 9th leadership review of the UCP of Jason Kenney's leadership. Hopefully that will be the day of real conservative change.
Mm-hmm. And Drew, where do you see yourself in the next Alberta election?
I'm very, very grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat, very grateful to represent Albertans for the last 10 years, 3 terms. And I believe I have the energy and the desire to still serve. Of course, I was ejected from caucus by Jason Kenney last May. And basically, he said he welcomed my public disagreement and debate, but he obviously didn't mean that when I was ejected. So I'm looking for a path forward so I can continue to represent Albertans that believe in economic freedom, individual opportunity, and public programs that are both effective and efficient. I'll be watching what happens very closely on April 9th. And if Jason Kenney is no longer the leader of the UCP, that may again become an option. And I just hope and pray that I have the opportunity to make the right decisions for my family, first of all, and Albertans.
Okay, and if Jason Kenney is still there, you would continue to run as an independent?
I'm certainly going to consider it. I will consider joining another party. I've also put out that Alberta should maybe have a rural party only. There's 87 seats in the Alberta legislature. 41 are not part of Edmonton and Calgary. I've put out that possibly we should start a party that just runs in those 41 seats that are not part of Edmonton and Calgary. There's a lot of good conservatives in Edmonton and Calgary as well, but this would allow us to focus on truly rural, let's call them non-metro concerns, and work in collaboration. It doesn't have to be divisive. We could do this as a potential coalition government. So I put that out there, and I've got pretty good reviews on that. A lot of people like the idea. Some think it could be bigger. But as I said earlier, we're now 14 months away from the next election. So it's time to make those decisions between now and May 1st.
Drew Barnes, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it. Love the chance to talk. You have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Drew Barnes is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.